Tomas Haake is the beating heart of one of the most influential metal bands, arguably one of the most influential bands, let alone metal bands, of all time, that being of course Meshuggah. A blend of technical, chuggy riffs, soaring guitar solos, pounding mechanically precise drums, and the roar of frontman Jens Kidman created a sound unlike any other. With their 9th studio album Immutable due for release on April 1st, 2022, let's take a closer look at the band, focusing of course on Tomas Haake, as it's a drum channel after all, and see why he and the band are credited as some of the most influential musicians of all time. You'd be forgiven for thinking that all Meshuggah songs are played in a variety of complex time signatures at all times, changing from one rhythm to another as and when they please, but the reality is in fact very different. The majority of your favourite Meshuggah songs, including Bleed, are centred around 4/4, but what makes the grooves interesting and gives the impression that they're being played in something like 5/4 or 5/7 or maybe something even crazier like 15/16, what makes the Meshuggah songs sound like this is the polyrhythms. Now let's use Bleed as an example because it's one of the most recognisable Meshuggah songs, focusing on the later part of the track after the guitar solo. The rhythm you've just heard is still based in 4/4, but the snare drum isn't being played where you would A, expect it to be for a standard 4/4 pattern, which would be on the 3, and B, not in the same place where Tomas has played the snare for the previous 6 minutes of the song, which incidentally was also on the 3. This groove is also being played against the repetitive guitar pattern from before, which is also played in 4/4, but follows the Herter pattern being played by Tomas on the kick drum throughout the song. The familiarity of the guitar riff suddenly being played with a differing snare pattern underneath could easily cause confusion. Furthermore, the Herter pattern has an innate triplet feel to it, so again you could be forgiven for thinking that the part of Bleed we just heard is being played in something like 5/6 or a similarly mad time signature. But no, it's still good old 4/4, it's just the left hand which is now playing a triplet snare pattern on top of the 4/4 kick pattern. It's genius in its theoretical simplicity and equally genius in its brilliant complexity when you sit down and analyse the song properly. Now I've mentioned already that Meshuggah write mechanical, clinically precise music, which is crazy to think that they've even dreamt it up, let alone actually played it live 1,000 times. And I have read and heard criticism about the band that, about Tomas Haake as well, that the playing is lifeless or it's boring due to its repetitiveness and precision. Now, personally, in case you couldn't tell from my tone of voice, I couldn't disagree more, and I'm going to explain why using my favourite Meshuggah song, which is New Millennium's Cyanide Christ. The point I'm going to be illustrating is that minor adjustments to rhythms being played can make a world of difference. It's a trick used by countless bands too, regardless of whether or not they play prog metal. New Millennium's Cyanide Christ is a fast song by Meshuggah standards, and focuses for most of its 5.5 minutes around a typically chuggy 6-note riff, but the chug pattern changes several times over the course of the song very subtly, making the verse sound different to the chorus, the bridge sound different to the breakdown, and so on. The only truly repetitive part of this song is the outro, and again, displacement plays a key role here, by playing notes on the kick drum across various parts of the bar depending on which section of the song it is. Tomas and Meshuggah use this to create an extremely complex song from a very simple idea. So let's listen to verse 1 into the chorus and note how subtle the change is but how different the music sounds. It is almost pointless to try and label parts of this song with traditional terminology such as verse, chorus and so on, but hopefully what I'm about to say makes sense. The verse begins with the 6-note pattern being played on the 1, on the downbeat, not the podcast though, shout out Craig Reynolds. The second half of the verse, the pre-chorus if you like, changes this and introduces the 6-note pattern on the upbeat, on the and of 4 leading back into the 1. Then when the chorus, if you can call it the chorus, the instrumental part with the soaring guitar line, the pattern here is brought back to starting on the 1 back to the downbeat. And as I said before, this is a brilliantly simple idea. It's just executed to an incredibly high standard and written into the song in a way that makes it feel completely different while it progresses throughout the run of the song. I mentioned at the start of this video that Tomas is the beating heart of Meshuggah, and I wasn't joking. This next point will link heavily to the earlier point regarding hiding complex rhythms in simple time signatures, because Tomas's right hand is what drives this point home. Now, the pulse of a song is a buzzword and quite poetic way of describing essentially how easy a song is to dance to. The pulse of Meshuggah songs almost always follow the pulse of whatever rhythm Tomas is playing with his right hand. They drive the songs forward, they set the pace and the tone for where the song is going, it solidifies the music and allows his other limbs and his fellow band members to play polyrhythms to their heart's content. Let's listen to some examples now and take note of how the right hand is consistently underlying the music. Before I move on, you might think that what I've just spoken about is really obvious and not worth mentioning at all, but the reason I've mentioned it is when compared to his prog metal drumming peers, Tomas uses his right hand in a way unlike any other, just by using it more as a tool as opposed to a paintbrush, if you'll forgive yet another metaphor. It might be simpler and less sonically impressive, but in terms of songwriting, well, there's a reason that Meshuggah stand head and shoulders above their contemporaries. The last point for today's video was originally going to be about how Tomas uses different cymbals at different parts of the songs to make them sound more interesting than just hearing someone destroy a crash for 5 minutes straight. But I realised this point was too heavily related to earlier points I've made about his right hand and the way it maintains the 4/4 song structure and so on, and it also is kind of obvious, so I'm going to move on and talk about something else instead. I am keeping the cymbal joke though because I couldn't think of a pun for what I'm going to talk about instead, which is how he utilises fill-ins. Submit your puntastic suggestions in the comments for what I could have titled this segment instead. Anyway, fill-ins, the thing you'll spend the second most amount of time practicing on the drums. Some drummers are known for their complex and endless fill-ins, looking at you Brandela, but Tomas is not at all. He's pretty much the opposite. Fill-ins are used very rarely in Meshuggah songs, usually only to signify a change from verse to chorus or whatever it may be. Indeed, these days it feels more and more common for drummers to fill in at the end of every other bar, sometimes even at the end of every bar they play, which can honestly get a bit overbearing, but Tomas does not do this. He lets his rhythms dominate the songs and he spares fill-ins for either song breaks or, as I've mentioned earlier, to progress the song. Even then, he's not known for having absolutely crazy insane fills which blow your mind the first time you hear them. I don't know, something like the snare china and kick alternating blast played by Vinnie Paul on the Pantera song Fucking Hostile. But there may be some songs where you're thinking now, like, you know, some Meshuggah songs that do contain a really tasty fill. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Tomas can't fill, because that would be blasphemy. I'm simply saying that he plays fills in a way that the overwhelming majority of drummers don't. He doesn't throw them around for fun, he doesn't flex for the sake of flexing, and he doesn't ever draw attention away from the song by doing something too wild. Tomas Haake is an incredibly musical drummer and a songwriting genius, so it felt poignant to end by highlighting how his restraint and discipline play a huge part in that. So that brings us to the end of the video, which is going to be a fair bit longer than the Buddy Rich episode if the script is anything to go by, but I've been a fan of Meshuggah for probably about 10 years now, whereas Buddy was a drummer I'd largely ignored until about 2 years ago. I know, forgive me. I'm also not sure why I'm rationalising the difference in video length, but here we are. I very much hope you've enjoyed watching. Please leave your feedback and thoughts in the comment section below, and if you did enjoy, a like would be very much appreciated. See you next time.